Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you all for your patience. We experienced some technical difficulties, but here we are. So welcome on behalf of Youthprise. My name is Lynn Matthews, Senior Advancement and Communications Officer for Youthprise, and we are so glad you're joining us today for what we believe is a very necessary conversation on gun violence. As with everything we do, we try to center young people and make sure their voices are the loudest in the room. And that's what we're going to do today. So we're looking forward to hearing more from them. And with that, it is my pleasure to turn things over to our very capable moderator and great friend of Youthprise, Lissa Jones-Lofgren.
Thank you, Lynn. I am delighted to be here as always and very humbled to be able to moderate this very critical conversation. I'm with you. It's a conversation we must have. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce an artistic performance, but before I do, I need to give a content warning. Today's artistic expression and dialogue with panelists will focus on gun violence, which is a very sensitive topic. We want to alert our audience that some of the lyrics in the video and the information discussed today may be distressing. Our intent is to provide a platform for young people to express themselves authentically about their experiences and their perspectives on the important topic that impacts their very life. So with that, I now have the privilege of introducing to you Hannah Savano. She's going to play a recorded performance. Quincy Poe will join us now to frame the conversation and lay the groundwork. Thank you, Quincy. Welcome.
Thank you, Lissa. It's great to be here. Hello, everyone. My name is Quincy Poe. I'm the Opportunity Youth Network co-lead at Youthprise. Welcome to Disrupting with Purpose. In addition to the amazing performance, we'll hear from Hannah. We'll also hear from an intergenerational panel on 3 different areas: mass shootings, community and school violence, and legislation. We recognize that gun violence extends beyond these 3 areas. So as we journey through this conversation together, I want you all to be open. I want you to engage in the chat. And then remember that a journey is often one of the best ways to learn. Back to you, Lissa.
Thank you, Quincy. And now to our artist of the hour, Hannah.
Hello, everyone. My name is Hannah Savano. I'm a multidisciplinary artist, organizer, speaker, and advocate residing in South Minneapolis. I'm grateful to everyone at Youthprise for bringing me into today's event and important conversation. The song that I'll be sharing today is a prayer for a better and more humane world. And a song of resilience and solidarity for everyone that is fighting through the battles and realities that we're going to be speaking about today. I believe that we're in the midst of a spiritual warfare, a warfare on our minds, the safety of our communities, and many of us are fighting to create a world where young people and all people can grow to be adults, parents, leaders that can live a long and full purposeful life without senseless violence taking that opportunity away. Thank you for your time, and I really hope that this can speak to somebody.
Destination of this flight is to the other side. Alright, I guess I had to go there. Guess I had to come here. I'm from the earth, but I've been taken to another place. I've been taken to another space, and there are powers in the air, can't see them all, and they have rockets and machine guns, hey, and a firing on my plane. I said fire, ready, aim, fire, ready, aim, fire. You can't shoot me down. Yeah, I'm on a rocket ship. Hey, and the destination of this rocket is to outer space. Alright, I don't know, but I guess I had to go. I guess I had to come here. I don't know where I'm from, but now I'm headed where I'm going, right? Yeah. I'm headed where I'm going, hey. And there are powers in the air, you can see them. Oh, and they have rockets and machine guns, hey. They're firing on my plane, yeah. I said fire, ready, aim, fire, aim. Ready, aim, fire. You can't shoot me down. Fire, aim, yeah. Ready, aim, fire, aim. Ready, aim, fire. You can't shoot me down. Look, I'm just tryna make it straight cause it's sideways. Tryna bring water to a dry place. Wanna bring hope where it ain't none. Tryna bang low to a high place. Oh, wanna make the shooter put the gun down. So mother gets to hold the sun now. Wanna make the lame man run again. Wanna make the blind man see the sun again. But all I hear is bang, bang, get. I don't think the powers really want that. Breathing on my neck, always on my back. Got the guns out, but I said, ooh, ready, aim, fire, aim. Ready, aim, fire, aim. You can't shoot me down. Fire, ready, aim, fire, ready, aim, fire, aim. You can't shoot me down, shoot me down. Ready, aim, fire. Oh, ready, aim, fire. Shoot me down. You can't shoot me down. No, no fire. Ready, aim, fire. Ready, aim, fire. You can't shoot me down. Can't stop me now. No.
I want to make a blind man see the sun again. Ready, aim, fire. What do we lose in gun violence? It's now my privilege to welcome to this stage the very talented Hannah Savano, founder, organizer, and director of Savano Music LLC. Savano is a multidisciplinary artist born and raised in South Minneapolis. She's a soul singer, transformational speaker, producer, pianist, poet, and community curator. Wow. Her intention is to express the power of vulnerability through intentional storytelling. Savano aims to uplift, activate, and inspire others to find power in their own voice. She uses songs of transformation, growth, and healing through mantra-like melodies to provide a powerful invitation for anyone listening to dig deeper than they're used to and to lean into the discomfort of feelings that this world has programmed us to suppress. That was absolutely lovely. Thank you, Hannah, and welcome.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you. Jerome Richardson, the Executive Director of Minnesota Teen Activists, welcome. Jerome Richardson is a 19-year-old rising junior at Temple University. He currently is studying political science, as well as a social entrepreneur, multidisciplinary artist, and humanitarian. At the age of 16, Jerome became the second youngest NAACP youth and college president in Minnesota state history. And later, at the age of 17, he became the executive director of the largest student-led nonprofit organization, Minnesota Teen Activists. He has proudly mobilized millions of youth across the globe through his grassroots efforts and social media efforts with 40,000 plus followers and 10 million plus views across Instagram. Welcome, Jerome.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for that. I'm happy to be here in this space, share with many other people who are doing tremendous work, like-minded and even greater in set areas. Excited to specifically dive into this conversation. It reminds me after the shooting happened in Uvalde and then in Buffalo, how the world was shaken. And even as it is shaken today, as the many tragedies happen consistently throughout this entire country. But specifically during that time, I know that many people were grieving. They were upset about the accessibilities of gun. They were upset about the lack of urgency. They were upset about the political tension and respect of people's lives. And so it was in Minneapolis when thousands of young people walked out of class and marched the streets and certainly demanded that we end the usage of ARs, ban ARs, and we make sure we protect our students, not only in the streets, but in the classrooms as well.
Jerome, you already got to testify. Thank you. I can't wait to hear more. That is so important. That is so important. Minneapolis is absolutely at the center of this. And now let me welcome two more of our panelists, if I can, please. Thank you. Ben Garces, a senior at Roosevelt Senior High, who has a passion for advocacy of migrants and student rights. He's a firm believer in bilingual education and hopefully going to be a lawyer. Welcome, Ben.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm
Thank
really excited to speak about gun violence today and how it's affected, like, us as a student, how it's affected, like, being in schools and how you feel within your school and what we can do to change that and feel safer within our own communities and within our own schools.
Thank you all for your courage to be here and to have this discussion. And last but not least, let me welcome Jose Perez, who's the director of Good Trouble, Bridgemakers and Youthprise. Jose R. Perez is 23. He serves as the board treasurer secretary and the director of Good Trouble. Jose is the youngest member of the Ramsey County Transforming Systems Together Committee and formerly the St. Paul City Council Reparations Committee. Jose is a St. Paul native and the son of a single mother, a Guatemalan immigrant. Jose has experience with the justice system, failing 1st and 9th grade, and as an English language learner with dyslexia. Jose is an R&B artist, a 2019 graduate of the High School for Recording Arts. Jose's vision for Minnesota is why he's an advocate for human-centered transformation of our education and economic systems. Jose Perez, welcome to the stage.
Gracias. It's an honor to be here with all these heavy hitters.
Well, you are too a heavy hitter, and let's get right to it with all of you heavy hitters. Let me please put out the first question for you to please consider. What are your thoughts on community violence and how it's impacting young people? And what I might do is just start out in the order that we went the first time with introductions, and then we'll just start going around, get into conversation with each other, and I'll try to get in where I can fit in. Cool? Okay, Hannah, would you kick us off? What are your thoughts on community violence? How is it impacting young people like yourself?
Thank you. I think the rate at which innocent lives are being taken is unacceptable, and that there are many roots to these issues that aren't addressed enough that go beyond the highest level in courtrooms of what folks in power can do to change gun regulations and gun control. I think what I see it affecting most in the communities I've grown up in and my generation and those around me is the constant state of fear that people live in now. We already deal with a lot of fear as people in this country. And so to have hijacked nervous systems is what it seems like to be. That's not anything that anybody deserves to live in, especially a kid that's just trying to exist and continue their education. To me, with these topics, I see different areas. I see community violence that happens outside. I see a different realm of the violence that does happen in schools. Although guns are a huge topic for all around, I think the roots of some of these things, such as police brutality and police violence, they're a little bit different roots in the conversation to me. But I think overall, as young people, we are getting more and more desensitized due to how frequently these things are happening. And it's not okay that it's starting to feel normal. I think we're becoming emotionally numb and reactionary and highly overstimulated due to the impact of the dangerous level of influence of certain things from social media, the way that we are being raised. There's family dynamics that affect people with personal trauma. And then we're also experiencing collective trauma that there aren't spaces enough to process in schools and in community.
A hijacked nervous system. Thank you. Jerome? You've spoken
Yeah.
about what your thoughts are. Please share some more.
Yeah, I'd love to just echo everything Savannah said, especially in the conversation of what does public safety look like and how have we addressed it. I can say I'm faintly proud of Minneapolis and how far we've come since the tragedy of 2020 with the new introduction and the passing of public safety legislation bills, for example, the no-knock warrant that killed Amir Locke in Minneapolis, and so many other bills that are ensuring, as well as Keith Ellison. Keith has done an amazing job as the Attorney General, suing Fleet Farm and so many institutions and companies that don't do well to our communities, and then leads to a pipeline for young people to be in prison and in the juvenile system or left killed. And so as we continue this conversation, I love to talk about where we are now, where we've come, what are some things that are being in place, things that are being reviewed, for example, the Department of Justice, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, the ongoing conversation of lack of resources in our communities that does exacerbate what we see as violence today.
I love it. The question I meant to ask you was one you just answered. You're such a great panelist, Jerome. Thank you. Because I wanted to ask you, as an activist, what are you doing to address school and community violence? And hey, I did not grab it, but you did. That was great. Thank you. And thank you for your activism. And thank you for saying that you think Minneapolis is further ahead than we were. Sometimes it doesn't feel like it to me, and I'm really grateful for the hope. Ben, sadly, I understand that you have personal experience being near a school shooting in Richfield. Would you?
So yeah, one of my best friend since preschool actually was just transferred to Richfield, and I had gone there for middle school. So we were at the homecoming game because I was just introducing him to a bunch of people that I had known. And luckily the dean didn't allow us to come in because I'm from another school. So we actually left about 10 minutes before the shooting actually happened. But it got me thinking about how, like, a lot of young people and a lot of students nowadays have to make the decision of whether sacrificing their social life for their own personal safety, because it's such a terrifying thing to go out and go into public spaces and big spaces because you don't know if someone's going to show up and have a problem with somebody, or someone's just not going to be in the right mental state and have a weapon or something like that. And it's something that I've realized a lot when I go out, is that you start looking for exits, you start noticing, you become a lot more aware of the people around you, and you're just scared all the time. Like Hannah said, you're in a constant state of fear. And I find it really unfortunate that a lot of my friends, like, don't like to go out into public spaces anymore. They don't like to go to festivals. They don't like to go to community events because it's so scary to just be out with a big group of people because you don't know what's going to happen.
That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. The constant state of fear, I really empathize with that because I feel it too. I feel it too. I'm looking at every exit, I'm watching everybody, but it's so stressful. Thank you. Jose, I would like you to talk to us about what do you think is happening and how should the community be responding?
I think the violence in our community has definitely hit our young people the hardest. Our young people are lacking the accessibility, the right type of mentorship. I also hear a little bit of feedback. Hold on. Hello, hello, hello. Okay, cool. Sorry, I'm gonna mess myself up. But to the root of what I was saying is we need to really reevaluate what we're doing with our young people. And when I say that is we need to look at education and seriously do some soul searching about what are we having our young people do? What are the results in the community? And how are we relating that back to what's happening in education? How are we making the correct investments in early childhood where young people's development is at record stages and we're letting the pandemic just fly by. We're letting virtual learning just fly by. We're letting all of the record numbers of mental health illness and violence just slide by. And we really need to, as a district, county, state, think about what is our education doing and how is it approaching our young people, especially those young people facing adversities in cycles of poverty, in cycles of miseducation and violence. So we need to seriously come together and reevaluate what is our school districts doing to our young people and why isn't it engaging our young people, and why are young people engaging in violence in our community? You're muted.
Jose, thank you. That was amazing. That's incredible. I thank you. I'm going to bring to the fore Bobby Brown III, co-founder of Beyond the Courts Violence Prevention Initiatives. Bobby is a clinically licensed psychotherapist and co-founder of Bobby Brown's Beyond the Courts Violence Prevention Initiatives. At the age of 15 years old, Bobby, his 2 older sisters, and 9-month-old niece were innocent victims of a drive-by shooting, resulting in Bobby sustaining a spinal cord injury and becoming dependent on a wheelchair for mobility. This senseless act of violence and Bobby's love of sports inspired the Brown family to start a nonprofit to raise the awareness about the effects of violence, as well as to share their story of hope and healing with youth, parents, and other community members. Bobby Brown III, welcome. I'd like to share.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, no problem at all. I want to make sure you got off mute.
Yeah.
Please, you've heard the young people speak. Would you please share your perspective as a young person who experienced violence yourself?
Yeah. Can I just say, I've been, I'm in my 40s now, and I've been doing the activist kind of work, healing work, ever since my family and I were victimized. And what's hard to hear is the kind of the same things that I was feeling at 15, and that my friends and family members, what we were experiencing when we were young, I should say. Just the sacrifice between what Ben said, the sacrifice between wanting to socialize and engage in your community and your friends, versus being afraid of possibly being a victim of gun violence. It just, it's something does have to happen. And I think the youth is the key, really at this point. So anyway, what was your question, Miss Alyssa Jones?
No problem at all. I just wanted to ask you, what can the community do about what's happening? We're causing problems for young people and asking young people to fix it. And how do we do better? How do we do better, Bobby?
Yeah. Well, I think it's really, it really falls on the legislative branch of our government. the laws have to change. They've needed to change for years. I was a youth when Columbine happened. That was unheard of. And since then, we have a record mass shootings at schools. I think, it's we always want people to do better, but we can't rely on people. We need to rely on changing the system, right? And so if I ask, let's change the heart of kids and the youth, that's extremely important. That's very important, but we can't really do that and expect it to be to get the results that we want. We have to really do this legislatively, I believe. And I think it's important for us to encourage youth like Jose and Ben and Jerome and Hannah to be in those positions of authority to make those changes, to make those decisions. That's one thing.
I appreciate that, Bobby. Thank you for being here. We're going to hear from you again at the end of the discussion for a Q&A. Stay with us and we'll be right back.
Yeah.
All right, to the panelists, thank you. Let's pivot a bit to mass shootings. Columbine High School, which sadly predates many, well, gladly predates many of you. You've already had enough trauma. Virginia Tech, Sandy Hook, Parkland High School, Robb Elementary, and Uvalde. How do these mass shootings affect your day-to-day experience in your community and in your school when it's constantly people under fear? This country loves its guns. It fears everybody and everybody has a gun. It just feels like some days. What are your thoughts, team?
I love what was spoken earlier about just the legislative process. And I empathize for y'all who have been doing this work for years on end. Don't know how you do it. I'm 19 and I'm really kind of stepping back to just reimagine, how I navigate these spaces. In the response to legislation, I think Minnesota specifically showed the power and the ability of legislation this past session, specifically with the work that was done within our trifecta at the governor, from the state senate to the house level, and the immense amount of restoration that was done and budgets that were spent on restoring community. And so I do know that if it's driver's license for all, if it's the Crown Act, if it's the no-knock warrant bill, if it's beyond the bullying bill, all these things have been set in place that really exemplifies what's important today. And so I would echo again the legislation piece at the federal level. We do know, right, there will be illegal activity happening, there will be loop arounds, but I know for the vast majority of it, legislation is an amazing way to constitutionally kind of reverse some of these things that we're seeing in our community. So I full-heartedly echo that, and I want to appreciate Mr. Bobby Brown for inviting young people in those spaces. I think the young people in Minnesota are doing that. You see folks from Bridge Makers at the Capitol. You see folks from Minnesota Teen Activists at the Capitol. And so, like I said, our state is moving and hoping to be an example for other places as well.
I can see you're in political science. Nice job, Jerome. Thank you very much. Hannah and Jose, we've heard many different assessments as to why this is happening. People say, well, it's gun access, it's mental health concerns, it's community isolation, bullying. They have 1,000 billion reasons why we think that these are the issues are core. What are the core issues as you see them?
I can be like a broken record at times. And I'm gonna just say education. I think the lack of adequate investment. I think the lack of teachers of color in this state is embarrassing. We are at 94% of white teachers that make up our workforce. We have to keep that stuff in mind when we look at the fact that 10,000 young people in the metro area get arrested annually in the state. So we have to start really grappling with the fact that education has a major intersection with the juvenile justice space, and the fact that we're now working de-siloing the work, coming together, because although I do believe the young people are a major key, it is the comfortability of adults why young people get pushed into system involvement, why young people consistently have the lack of mentorship, and why the state doesn't make a space like the teacher workforce opening for young Black and brown students to enter into it. So there's a lot of things, there's a lot of symptoms to the cancer, and I think education is that root cause. And until we start talking about what's going on in education, and instead of SROs and limiting access to buildings, until we start talking about the real meat and potatoes of the dish, we ain't never gonna get to dinner.
I mean, I am struck by the fact that in the earlier comments, you used the miseducation. Carter G. Woodson wrote a book, The Miseducation of the Negro. And now here you are talking about the miseducation and education again, still. Teach, Jose. Keep it going. Yes, Hannah, what do you think? What do you think?
Yeah, I respect everything that's been said. I think that's all extremely essential. When I think about things that I can speak to primarily is my experience and my peers' experience. To be transparent, I'm not somebody that's been immersed in policy work and been in these rooms for years. And so what I can speak to and I feel I have a connection with is what I've seen and where it comes from, where it stems from. To add on to education, I think it doesn't make any sense for there to be 1 or 2 counselors for hundreds and hundreds of students. When people come to school, often we're dealing with traumatic family dynamics, things that are outside of family that are affecting the way somebody feels isolated and what they're going through, and not enough affordable, accessible mental health services. I think for there to be extracurricular activities in so many schools and our teachers and educators trained to check in and make sure people are there on time and that they're doing what they're supposed to. And if they're not doing what they're supposed to, they're sent out. I remember being sent out and sent to the hall because I didn't learn like everybody else. And maybe me and my friends would act up, but it was truly because we were going through something traumatic, either at or outside or both of school. And so for there, what I see when I think of solution-based possibilities that prevents these things from happening, I don't see why there can't be, programs and classes and courses for educators and practitioners and mental health advocates to be in schools and in spaces where young people are gathered to really stop before we just focus on somebody reaching certain expectations education wise and really get to know how are these kids doing? Are your needs being met? What is going on with you in your life? And what are the things that you feel alone about and how can I support you? Because when a student comes to school and already feels like nobody cares and there's so much going on that people that are around them are unaware of, if there are not spaces where people are learning like DBT classes and experiences to be able to regulate your own emotions and know what's going on and not suppress it. We're in a culture of being numb. I've experienced that firsthand with addiction as a teenager and just experiencing my peers. I think a huge contributor to violence and people acting out of character or choosing to be reactionary. A lot of it does have to do with substance abuse at such a young age. There's so much of that, especially in public schools in the spaces that I've grown up in. And so to not have a space in schools right now where I see anybody really checking in, there's always that, special PE teacher at times, or someone will have an expectation where there's somebody that's like, oh man, I remember that they actually cared about me, but that's the exception. There isn't an actual consistent daily or weekly check-in where we're finding out how are students doing and are your needs being met before it's like, if you're not doing what you're supposed to, you're a bad student and nobody cares and you need to get your stuff together. People really need help and they might not know how to express that. So I think that needs to be something that's in place.
We need to return to our humanity if we ever had it. Ben, thank you, Hannah. Ben, as of June 27th, today, over 300 mass shootings have occurred in the US and now in other nations like New Zealand, Norway, Australia. They had one mass shooting and they're instituting laws, sweeping gun control laws. Is this our new normal?
I really don't know whether the laws are gonna fix what's happening, whether legislation is gonna really have that big of an effect when, like everybody else said, that we are failing our students at such a fundamental level from such a young age. We're treating them like numbers in a system. And with weapons, like, we can ban them, things are going to happen. But if we don't start teaching empathy in schools again, if we don't start having these connections, like Jose and Hannah said, that students need with teachers. I've had the amazing opportunity to grow up around teachers, around people. Teachers care, they want to be there for you a lot of the times, but there's so much happening within the school. There's such an expectation on teachers that it's too much, and there's not enough support for everyone, or schools are too big at times. There's so much that we are lacking within our schools, and we're putting our focus on a million other things. And like Hannah said, we have my school has, I think, 1,200 students, and we have 3 counselors. It takes forever to get an appointment with them. If you want to talk about college, something else, it's even harder to talk. It's even harder to talk about mental health with them. There's a lack of resources within our schools where students are just invisible and going through, and nobody's really paying attention to them. And then these students are going through extremely traumatic things, extremely horrifying situations at home and in their community. And then they're going out and committing terrible things. They're doing terrible things at times because no one was there to guide them, to help them, and to empathize with them, or to show them the dehumanization of students is what's happening right now. We're treating students again like criminals, and they're acting like criminals at times. And I think that's the fundamental problem, and that's should not be our new normal.
Absolutely. If you treat me like a criminal and I behave like one, thank you. We're going to switch to legislation. I wish we had more time for this. I'm going to bring to the stage our next guest, Senator Bonnie Westland, legislator, state of Minnesota. I'm a small business owner with my own family law and mediation practice, she writes. I've lived in the Northwest Metro for nearly 50 years and have deep ties to this community and the surrounding area. I've been a single mom most of my adult life and had to work hard to obtain education, launch my own business, and care for my family. I just completed my first legislative session as a freshman state senator, representing the communities of Plymouth, Medicine Lake, and Maple Grove. Welcome, Senator Westland.
Thank you so much. I am sitting here furiously taking notes. Everything our youth panelists have said is just spot on, and it is such an honor and privilege just to be in your presence today, and thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And thank you for sticking with us while these young people respond. And then I'm going to ask you to respond. I appreciate it. I called you to the stage a little early, but I'm glad you came. Thank you. I see my notes. I'm doing too much today. Let's talk about legislation. There's been a lot of conversation about access to guns in the federal and state legislatures. There's been a lot of conversation about it here. When we think about the balance between legislation and access to guns, what do you think is the proper balance? Is there a proper balance? And anyone on the youth panel can address it to begin with, please.
That's a great question. And I think when I think about, and Christy dropped a great question as well, talking about just also about how mass shootings rooted in whiteness, what's the role of what, I feel like these things are, and I think there's a lot of things that are integrated into the fabric of America. I think there's some white supremacy, guns, these are in the fabric of America. So how do we honor that? How do we understand that? How do we combat that, knowing that it's just integrated into our fabric? We need much better teachers. I want to applaud and agree with everything Hannah and Benjamin be talking about. But what I don't want someone like Senator Bonnie to hear or to pick up on is, we need some more counselors. We just need some more counselors in the school building. The counselors suck. I'm gonna be honest with you. The counselors, even if you double them, they're not what Hannah, what you said was maybe once in a blue moon, there's a gym teacher that actually engages with you. Guess who's not paid as much as the rest of the teachers? Guess who has less requirements to have a long-term teaching license. Those teachers, those gym teachers, those paraprofessionals, those deans, the lowest paid, first in, first out. We need to redefine who are we allowing around our young people. We will never get rid of guns in this country, but we have to get rid of the white supremacy in our education. We have to center our Black and brown and indigenous lives in the center of our education. So I'm always rooted back to what? Education, because you're not going to get rid of guns, but you can get rid of bad educators and bad curriculum. And that's where we got to start.
Right on, Jose. Right on. Who else wants to weigh in?
Yeah, to add to that, I remember being at school downtown my first year of high school, and I grew up being usually the only white person in my friend groups and in spaces I was around, and witnessing week after week a friend of mine having a serious issue going on in their lives, and coming to school doing the best that they could to focus on their work, and having white educators that have no way to empathize or relate with what they were going through. There's a disconnect of even knowing how to communicate because of how uncomfortable it is and the difference in experience, that it was just painful to watch no progress. And, friends of mine that already are experiencing the effects of white supremacy in the world, and then coming to school, and rather than a teacher being able to be transparent, maybe that they didn't understand, there's a level of like, I don't know how to help you because I don't share your same experience. And I think that's why there's so much of an issue with there being so many white teachers in schools where there's such a diverse population of students, is because there's a disconnect in experience. The same way that so many police are patrolling neighborhoods that they have no experience in, or cities and areas that they did not grow up in. There's already a level of, I don't experience what you experienced, therefore I don't see you as human, and I also don't know how to communicate or connect. And I think that that's a serious issue, and it causes more reason for students to not feel that they can focus or care about what the things that are also whitewashed that we're being taught. Because why should I care, and why should I tune into what you're saying if you don't truly care about me? You don't know how to care about me. And the things that I need right now, there's no space for it, there's no room for it, and no one is in tune. So just to add to what Jose said, for sure.
It's a colossal nightmare, I swear. This is too much. I'm learning so much. When we think about, let's bring in Senator Bonnie. Senator Bonnie, can you tell us, what are you hearing that you can bring back to the legislature that these young people are, what are you picking up that they're laying down?
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, you're all speaking my language. When we're talking about gun violence, as with anything, we've got to talk about systems, because you can't just address something over here and not deal with the other thing over here. Everything is interconnected. One of my favorite quotes is from Bishop Desmond Tutu, and he said, there comes a point where we need to just stop pulling people out of the river. We need to go upstream and find out why they're falling in, right? So one of the things I was really proud of this year in terms of what we were able to do with our trifecta, and in our Senate, we had a 1-vote majority. And with a 1-vote majority, a lot of people assumed we were going to play small ball. We were going to just do the bare minimum. We went bold. And one of the reasons we were able to go bold and do some of the things that we did was because, first of all, we have the most diverse Senate that we've ever had in the history of Minnesota. And our DFL caucus has a majority of women leading it. And when you bring people to the table and bring in different perspectives, you have things like driver's licenses for all, the Crown Act, banning no-knock warrants, restore the vote. All of these things become possible the more voices we bring to the Senate. So to loop this back, we did make a historic investment in education that included about $60 million for increasing Teachers of Color and American Indian Teachers Act. There is a focus on trying to bring in more diversity into our schools. We passed ethnic studies. There were certain things that we were trying to do, of course, that made some people's heads explode because God forbid you talk about real history. So we were doing some of those things. So when you're talking, Jose, about the need for education, I hear you, and that's what we're bringing back. That's what I will bring back to my colleagues, but we made a start this year. We made a start. Hannah, you talk about hijacked nervous systems. One of the things I talk about a lot is trauma and the impact of trauma and adverse childhood experiences on kids. When that starts early on, it actually impacts neurodevelopment. So what are we doing to effectively help kids who are experiencing trauma? What are we doing to support families to make sure we have housing, we have food? We passed breakfast and lunch, free breakfast and lunch for all kids in the state of Minnesota. I supported a bill for more community schools that provide wraparound services to kids and families. So I guess what I'm saying, and then I'll shut up, but all of these things are connected to each other. We have major juvenile justice reform. We have restorative practices. We invested in violence prevention and violence intervention programming. We invested in research. So when we talk about the guns, and we have to talk about the guns, we have to talk about all the other things that contribute to gun violence.
Thank you. Thank you. Ben, what does language have to do with it? If you don't speak English as a first language, what's that got to do with it?
When you don't have teachers that can communicate with your students, there's a pretty big disconnect right there. There's a lot of immigrants in Minnesota. There's a lot of students, ESL students, who may not speak the best English. There's a lot of people who just completely overlook these kids, and they're forgotten essentially. They're maybe can communicate with one or two teachers in the school, and that's it. And it's a pretty big issue with the whole disconnect with that.
Thank you very much for bringing your perspective. Now, team, I would like to welcome back Bobby Brown III to come and join us for a question and answer session. I'm told we have tons of great questions, so we'll get right to them. Welcome back, Bobby Brown III. Good to see you again. Thank you for staying with us. All right, thank you. Anybody can answer this one. What role do you think a lack of household resources, financial and parental support with education play in gun violence, and the correlation of education and gun violence? So when your family doesn't have it, what role do you think it plays in community violence?
Yeah, absolutely. Community violence is, I think, a result of lack of resources, as you spoke about in your question. But even in the household, it could be absent a father, absent mother. It could be identity crises. It could be all these things, hunger, without having, shelter. All these things result to young people having to fend for themselves, to grow up quickly at a young age, and to find anything that's tangible for them to be able to survive. And that survival mode is oftentimes most easily accessible by war on drugs and war on violence. I want to shy away from, I know everything we have been speaking about today has an underlying tone, and it's either police violence or it's community violence by random killings. And we spoke a bit about school shootings, but in the respect of community violence and what that looks like, as we've said again and time and again, it's the resources that are in the household. And even wanting to shy away from the idea of Black on Black crime and these ideas that we have in Black communities, because it is not Black on Black crime. It's, for lack of better terms, interracial, communal. These terms and these political agendas, propaganda, all circle back to the idea of white supremacy, as if white people don't kill each other, as if Latino people can't kill each other, as if, X, Y, and Z. And so I think we have to reimagine what public safety looks like in the way that we address it on a basic level. There's so much wrong with languages and bills and et cetera, because it has a microaggression tone to it. And if we try to tackle a system while approaching it in the perspective of the system, we will never be able to dismantle the system. And so we have to completely reimagine. I don't care if we have to swipe every police force, if we have to reorganize the Constitution, whatever needs to be done. Young people today and Gen Z are doing in marching, and we're doing more than marching. We're flipping over the table, and making sure that our voices are heard in these spaces, and trying to change the language. I think Hannah did something excellent, and I'll move from this in a second. It's the way that we speak about things. It's the music that we listen to. It's all these collateral things in our lives. And I think it's important that we have to approach struggle from more compassion. And so I think that begins in the schools, like Jose said. I'll stop there, but I really do want to, if you leave with anything today, is that we have to move away from categorically institutionalizing and stereotyping these communities with words like black crime and etc.
That is so critical. James Baldwin said language can invent anything, and that those inventions are designed to be able to create a kind of fear that Hannah talks about that keeps you in a hyper state of nervousness and fear for everyone else. As soon as you see a Black person, you think black on black crime, if they keep telling you that. And so that's exactly right. Human beings do things to other human beings. Let's talk about this. How do you all envision the community supporting young people to make better decisions? What can we do? What do we need to do? And sorry to ask the people who are most affected by it, because believe me, as a Black woman, I'm knowing what I'm asking, but I'd also rather they not come to their own conclusions, perhaps.
That's real. No, and you understand, you be in these spaces. But if I could take a swing at it, I'm gonna just lead it back. There was a comment by an amazing educator, Miss Yang or Mrs. Yang. She's in the chat, and she mentioned something that I really wanted to highlight, especially while we have a senator in here in such a historic session. Well, it just takes one vote to really stir up some good trouble. She talked about it's not about the dollar investment that we need for our teachers of color. It's about recruiting, retaining, and actually making this profession available to young Black and brown Gen Zers or people that are trying to switch their degrees or because right now you have to get married to the degree if you want to even do education. You have to sacrifice your social life. You have to go into debt. You have to do all these things just to get in the classroom. And if you survive that very predominantly white space, and if you survive the curriculum that's not going to make you be able to turn the lives around, which we need desperately in the Twin Cities, we need to be able to retain amazing teachers like Mrs. Yang or Miss Yang, excuse me. And we need to be able to actually have teachers mentor those young Black and brown students that have been most marginalized and underserved and overlooked, to have teachers that genuinely can connect with them, that genuinely reflect the potential that they are. So we need to get this teacher workforce a lot Blacker, a lot more Indigenous. We need to root our curriculum in more service work and more service learning and more critical thinking and social emotional learning and all the things we talked about. So please, you'll probably be hearing from me very soon, because we be, like Jerome said, we be having the young people up and down the Capitol. But we understand that it's a difficult issue for a multi-layered reasons. But we need, at least for our marginalized young people in our community, to have access to teachers, licensed teachers with a long-term teaching license to be able to do the work. Because right now, the workforce that we have right now is not, it's been producing the results we got. And that's why we're in crisis to crisis to crisis. And thank you for your service, Senator Westling. I know I can be a little intense at times, but we care and we need the change.
Jose, you're in a fight for your life. Let the passion roll. Let the passion flow. I'm totally picking up what you're laying down. Right on. Who else? Bobby Brown III. What are you thinking about?
I'm just inspired. I'm sorry. The youth. Okay, so the question was, how can we? What was the question? But Jose, Jerome, you guys. I mean, all of you are incredible, and I'm inspired, and I'm actually hopeful for the future because of this and hearing this. And hearing you all speak and the passion that you have. Sorry for taking that side note, but yes, what was the question?
No, the side note's the most important part. The young
Yeah.
people. We must love
Yes.
on the young people and feed
Yes.
them, right?
Yes.
And give them
Yes.
the good things.
Yes.
Yes. So let's pivot a bit. What do you think about the idea of amending the Constitution? There's a growing movement calling for us to look at the anti-Black history of the Second Amendment. Actually, I did a podcast on that. That is deadly serious. That is really serious. The anti-Blackness in the Second Amendment. And radically reimagine what a healthier society for all would be. Young people did not create gun culture or enable the lack of gun control, and strengthening the education system alone won't change what happens when so many people have access to guns with few regulations. That is not my opinion. That's the opinion of the writer. What do you think about amending the Constitution?
I think that's a little above my pay grade to really give a educated or just a sound response to that. Maybe the senator can respond to that. Yeah.
Absolutely. But you do believe in legislation, though. But you did speak about
most definitely.
right?
Oh, well, yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. I do believe in the legislation, and I believe that legislation, again, I think I saw somebody in the comments that said, we do need to change the heart of the community, of people. And I think that is extremely important, but that is a task that, as a therapist, working with people and trying to get them to move towards a better, healthy vision of themselves is difficult. It's difficult and it takes time. However, laws change and it changes like that, right? And it's the law of the land. And so I think it is extremely important. It has to deal with education. It has to deal with poverty and access to access to resources for our youth. It has to deal with legislation. It has to deal with being able to provide Youthprise with grants and money. So legislation is extremely important. Yeah. Sorry.
Excellent answer. Nice job. Thank you, Bobby Brown III. Senator, should we change the Constitution?
Well, so the problem with changing the Constitution is it's very difficult, and it's meant to be very difficult because we get some really bad things if we could change the Constitution. That's not to say we shouldn't try. There are a number of things that we need to do. Here in Minnesota, this year we passed two, from my perspective, very basic gun violence prevention laws that we should have done a long time ago, but we could never get a hearing on them. And that was a universal background check, so that even with private party transfers, there has to be a background check. That seems like common sense stuff to me. The other thing that we passed is the extreme risk protection orders. They're also known as red flag laws. Again, to me, this is pretty basic. There's an organization actually here in Minnesota called the Violence Project, and they've done a lot of research specifically with mass shootings, school shootings, church shootings. Mass shootings happen everywhere now where we live. And one of their key findings is that people who are mass shooters have shown crisis for sometimes as many as years, from months, weeks to years. People often leak their plans to someone. And so what we know is the information is out there. So what is our opportunity to intervene with that person before they harm others or harm themselves? The other thing we know about mass shooters is oftentimes they are suicidal. They're experiencing a suicidal crisis in their lives. And the mass shooting is the grand hurrah before they die, either suicide by cop or they take their own lives. And so extreme risk protection orders are designed for people, family members, police officers, et cetera, who receive information that someone is at risk of harming themselves or others, has the opportunity to petition the court to temporarily remove guns from their possession. They have an opportunity to have a hearing. There is due process. Don't listen to the nonsense. There is due process. And so these are a couple of minor things that we've done. I have a bill sitting in my desk drawer waiting to drop in February to ban assault weapons in Minnesota. All right. I didn't want to do it this year because we wanted to get the things done that we knew we could. Banning assault weapons is going to be a heavy lift with a 1-vote majority. So I need everyone to make sure you contact your legislators to make sure that we get support for that.
Thank
you. So there are
sir.
things that we can do. Yeah, sorry. There are things that we can do, but it's sometimes
Thank you. Appreciate you. And thank you for your work. To the youth panel, I'm going to thank Bobby Brown III. And I'm going to thank you for your contribution and thank you for sticking with us on our mental health. We need it so desperately. I remember that Dr. Joseph White, who founded the field of Black psychology, said that 2% of all psychologists, in your case, psychotherapists in the country are Black. We need you desperately. Thank you. And Senator, we need you to take all these things up on that hill and let the people speak. And we thank you for your service this session. Thank you very much. Thank you for being our guests. To the young people, we don't have much time and I want to center on you. So let me ask you, what role do nonprofit youth serving organizations have in this broader conversation? The writer of this question posits the idea that many of these organizations are the places where young people make connections and feel seen and heard. Is that your experience? That the nonprofit sector shows up?
I would say certainly. I think Minnesota is nonprofit haven. There's about a million nonprofits. There's tons of Fortune 500. So it always makes me happy how much resources and money and grant opportunities that there can be at times in Minnesota, especially to fill the void where schools have not stepped up to the plate and provided that wraparound service. And so the work that NGOs and nonprofits are doing that are youth-led, actually, to be quite frank with you, the ones that are making the most noise on the grassroots level are youth-led or were youth-founded with young adults. And so I'm really appreciating that. And I'm also really appreciating a lot of the adult-led organizations who are really allowing some of our organizations to lean on them and to, work as a big brother, big sister, opportunity. And so there's so many organizations like, of course, Youthprise and McKnight Foundation and Minneapolis Foundation and so many more who are doing the work and to really fill that void. Yes, can there be more work done? And yes, can we make these spaces more equitable? But I think some of our mentors and elders are really still working today to make space and pave way for young people. St. Paul has some work to do, but Minneapolis and other places is certainly being more welcoming.
Thank you, Jerome. Hannah, what do you want to leave the audience with? What thought do you want them to take back with them?
Yeah, I think if we can continue to fund the police, then we surely should be able to funnel the same money and investment into affordable mental health services and various forms of healing and mental emotional development for families that don't have those resources or are not in the orbit of that being around them in community. We should also be able to create accessible spaces for young people to pour themselves more into the arts, not just kids that can afford to go to a school where there is performance arts, but something that is more accessible. For me personally, the only reason that I survived the things that I did and the specific traumas I experienced and being alone in that time as a young person is because I was around the arts. I was around people that were turning their trauma into transformation or into testimony, whatever you want to call it. That saved my life. I've seen it save tons of people's lives. And so a mixture of having accessible ways for people to actually be communicating to adults and people around them. I'm really struggling right now. I don't know what to do about it, but not suffering in silence and being in community, but still in isolation. I really do feel that having spaces that are safe and often in those spaces where there are the arts and music and different forms of release, the things that are being suppressed and held in because we are taught as young people, especially young men, that you can't express emotion and you can't feel things. And if you do that, that's weakness. To have spaces where the opposite narrative is being poured into kids, there are often mentors and leaders and activists that are in those spaces. So to have that be implemented in schools, but also, the Boys and Girls Club and things like that exist at community centers where it's not just accessible to someone like myself, where my family was fortunate enough or privileged enough to give me the opportunity to experience therapy. Therefore, maybe I made it through something and I had the guidance that so many people that live their life traumatized and grow into adults that are traumatized deserve to experience the same as I do.
Thank you, Hannah. Wise words. Jose?
Man, you caught me off guard. I was listening. You know, we're really stronger together, and Minnesota has been doing a lot of great work. Like Jerome said, is the land of 10,000 nonprofits. And I think although there's been a lot of great work going on, I think we owe it to not only ourselves, but to our children to really come together and figure out what is going on behind these school walls. Are we genuinely sending our young people to a safe space? Are we genuinely sending our young people to a psychologically safe space? Are we equipping our teachers to do what's necessary? Or are we just doing things, dotting I's and crossing T's for the comfortability of adults, administrators, superintendents, and anybody and everybody that aren't in the school to prison pipeline? I think we really need to really do some soul searching as a community and really figure out what is it that we want for our young people, and how is it that we want to, how is the approach going to look like to have a safe community?
Excellent. When the federal government can use your 3rd grade reading score to predict prison beds, we are in deep trouble. Ben, bring us home. What do you want us to remember?
I just want everybody to remember that at the end of the day, it's a education issue. It's a lack of empathy issue. It's a disconnect between teachers and students. There's no real role models within our communities that we can look up to at times, especially as like a student of color. It's hard to find a teacher of color that I can relate with, that I have a shared experience with. And I just want people to push a little bit more for students, for teachers of color, and to have more brown and Black spaces available to students and to young people within our community.
I want to say thank you. Jerome says nonprofits, legislation, make the government change. Hannah, go to the people and give the people what they need. If we can fund institutions that hurt people and young people specifically, we can fund institutions that build. Jose, we need more educators of culture. That's what my friend Resma calls it, right? More educators who look like us and more people who understand our experience to be able to support you, Benjamin, in the schools, and to be able to be a mentor and a resource for all of you. Would you please join the audience in giving it up for Hannah, Jerome, Jose, Benjamin, Bobby Brown III, and Senator Westland. You have been incredible. You are human beings who are changing my thinking, you're changing my mind, and most importantly, you're changing the minds and hearts of the people who are on this call. You give us hope that the future is bright despite our difficulties, and you have my allegiance to do whatever I can to go with you, to follow you wherever you need me, or stand alongside you if that's better, but you can always count on me. To the viewing audience, we thank you for being here. To Youthprise, thank you for putting on this incredible conversation. To Hannah, I cannot thank you for that beautiful, beautiful performance enough. I just can't say thank you enough. We want all of you to know that Youthprise has a poll about opportunity youth policy, and they'd appreciate youth completing and folks sharing it with their youth networks. The team is going to drop it in the chat, and it will drop it and the event survey in the chat at the end. Clearly, I'm tongue-tied by all the wisdom that was dropped right up here in this particular space. I want to say to Hannah, Jerome, Jose, and Ben, and I say it only in that order because that's how it went on Zoom, from my heart to yours. May your stars continue to rise and may your futures continue to be bright. I cannot wait to see what you're going to do. Thank you to Youthprise for making all of this possible. Take care, everybody. Be concerned about one another, and the young people will lead us on the way back. Thank you, and take care.